Tom Barrett is the director of the Minnesota Gambling Control Board. He'll answer that question as best as he can, and any other questions that you might have. Thanks for coming out, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. How are we all doing?
Good.
All right. It's good to be honest with your regulator. Anybody have numbers on the game yesterday? First of all, thanks on behalf of the Gambling Control Board, folks that organized this gathering. Really appreciate that. It is part of what we need for the industry in terms of education. Get the word out. Let me take you back in time. About 3 years ago, actually it was longer than that, about 4 or 5 years ago, when legislators were looking at the impact of charitable gaming, when the smoking ban was passed and what happened with activity since those times, and not that the smoking ban was the only contributing factor. But obviously it went from a $1.4, $1.5 billion industry down to below a billion. Still huge in terms of activity, but an impact on the charities nonetheless. And so they took that opportunity and said, we'd like the board to take a look, do a study, see what's working, what's not working, where there can be some efficiencies, where there can be reduced regulation. So we came up with a pretty comprehensive report. As regulators, we've never been given that opportunity to do much of the advanced, proactive work. But this did give us an opportunity. It was with input from the charities, with the bar owners, with all the representatives that are involved in charitable gaming, and we put out a report and labeled a number of issues. And the majority of all the recommendations in that report, I think it was in 2009, were implemented with two key exceptions. One, even though the report identified the wish of the industry to work towards some automation, that didn't happen. And then there's also a provision, we all know about taxes, okay, we're regulatory neutral on the taxes, but that was an issue raised by the charities, and that was factored in as well. If there's a way to find a simpler way to record the activity, pay the taxes, what have you. So that was included in the report, and then we put it to the legislators to act on. And like I said, they acted on a number of things with the exception of automation for the games and the taxes. Until a couple of years ago, the industry approached the legislators and said, geez, we really want to move on this electronic gaming and tax reform. And so for the previous 3 years, representatives from allied charities, bar owners kind of went in trying to pitch the idea of electronic gaming, and were not successful until this last year. Now, you could find different reasons why they were successful, but obviously the main focus was, geez, we, the legislators or the citizens, want to build a new Viking Stadium. Where are we going to get the money? And that's what really brought the attention back to that electronic gaming opportunity. And then, I don't want to sound like I'm promoting, I'm just trying to give some added background on how we got to where we are today. So with much input from the industry, much discussion from a regulatory perspective, input from the vendors, the thought was, no, let's give this a shot. Now, you could sit all day and talk about the numbers or projections, but we dealt with some of those vendors. We dealt with, well, we said there's no other model in the country that's talking about or doing what was being proposed in Minnesota. We went forward with some confidence, talking again with vendors and some expectations of what the play is. You know, could it return back to the billion-dollar industry? Just talking about it, before any electronics came on the picture, December we started seeing double-digit increase in the paper sales. So things are starting to happen. Is it a cause just because of the media attention, or maybe the economy's getting better? But we started to see it increase. I think a lot of the charities, distributors, the paper manufacturers, they all know what we're talking about. So we did see an uptick. But regardless of the uptick, is that enough to fund a Viking Stadium or get revenue back to the charities? And so they went forward with the passage, the inclusion of the bill, allowing for electronic devices to be played for Pulltabs. Link Bingo, which we haven't really talked much yet today, but that's, there's some demonstrations we're in development in that. But we worked real hard, real close with legislators, with the charities to try to get the best foot forward in terms of what's going to be launched here in Minnesota. And there's a lot of folks, keep an eye on Minnesota. The state of Virginia is gearing up for very similar in terms of the pull tab. So we want to do what's as best we can, but also with the speed that, with some efficiencies in terms of what's being launched. So I could go down a whole litany of the bill, and I'll spare you that. I think it's important to get some background. But included in the bill were a lot of provisions, restrictions, depends what you want to call it. You talk to bar owners, they want the slots in the bar. Well, slots in the bar, at least in this session, aren't going to happen. The focus is on the charities. The focus is on the games that were in play as we know them today in terms of a finite number of chances in a pull-tab game. The focus is on bingo, the way we all know bingo to play against each other as opposed to player versus machine. And so we went forward with the standards and some of the specifics in law to get those provisions in place. Yes, there are other entities out there mindful of the impact charitable gaming has on their operation. And so yes, there was influence. Things like the number of devices per site based on seating capacity, based on what the device can do or what it can look like. It can't mimic a slot machine. It can't have spinning reels. All that was provided in the law. And so our goal, our focus at the board was trying to continue what was developed in law and get it into some reasonable format so these manufacturers can sit down and go, yeah, we can produce a product with these limitations or not. And so part of the opportunity, I think, again today is these guys are still gauging, is Minnesota a good market for the product they want to bring in. But to the extent that we were comfortable in terms of the regulatory provisions, what these games could do, that's been our focus. So as we move towards the approval of the standards, working with the board, working again with manufacturers, to produce what we think are acceptable standards within the confines of the law, and then make it available. We thought, geez, do we want to get into a request for proposal and really narrow down the scope of who's going to be involved in this product equipment? We thought, well, no, because we got a pretty good model that's been in place for a number of years. That in the sense that it's an open, the manufacturers that are interested, distributors that want to bring the product to the charity, and then the charities themselves. And so you look at that three-tier system. It worked before, it should work again. And so that's where we're at today, where we got a number of vendors, not all here, but a good representation nonetheless, to help educate you, the charities primarily, and maybe there's some bar owners here as well that want to know what's going on. But we try to put, we being the board, try to put our best foot forward in terms of what we think was the intent of the legislation, what the restrictions are, and frankly, what is it we can regulate it. We try to stay neutral. We don't care if they use the money for a stadium. We know that taxes are a part of it. We want to make sure that the games are in place, maintains integrity, so the player knows they're getting what they deserve. The vendors get a fair price for the product they're providing, and then we can keep track of it. You yourselves, the charities that have to record the money. We see some great opportunities for some accounting efficiencies as these things roll out. And that's where some of the, I know the questions are coming from as far as how do we do this versus that. But I just want to kind of give an overview of how we got to where we are today. Yes, there's a couple of vendors that are in place. We got others obviously going through the license application process. I wish they were all licensed today. I say that, respectfully, but there is a process in that regards to making sure that these folks are good vendors and they'll stand up to test in the product. And then we get into the product testing, not just the board keeping a look on things, but the requirement that they send their product out to an independent testing lab. So it meets all those standards. So once the board does get it for consideration, we're pretty confident that what they put out and what they're talking about is what's available for play. So we're kind of bringing us up to current day. Yep, we got a couple vendors. Some of the devices are in play right now. We're also hearing from the have-nots, be it the bars that might have charitable gambling but don't have electronics, and they don't want to lose any competition to their, the guy across the street. We understand that, but the board doesn't dictate who gets the electronic devices. It's been all along a combination of effort between the charity, the bar owner, and working with the distributor. So the calls that we get saying, geez, we wanted our bar, the reply is simply, do you have charitable gaming now? If you do, great, work with your charity. Well, they don't want to do it. Well, our focus is on who we license. We license the charity. So we encourage them, work with the charity. Maybe there's, like you're all here today, trying to learn a little more, trying to get that comfort level up. Nobody's required to take these electronic devices on. you can continue to play paper. If you do have the electronic, current law dictates that you continue to play the paper. But as I mentioned, you see increase in the paper sales as well. And that's at sites that have electronic gaming. So there's some kind of interesting things that we're seeing going on. But at the same time, we try to make ourselves available for questions. Depends who you talk to last. I know we've tried to get the same kind of message out there. But depending upon who you talk to, be it a distributor, another charity, geez, I don't understand this, or it's not written down. I mean, we hear that from manufacturers as well. They want to design the greatest, neatest game, but then you got to redirect them to some of the limitations, and so they back off a bit. But I think it's important that as regulators, we're trying to do the best thing in terms of what do the industry want, who's out there repping the product, and what does it mean, and then how do we get it in play, and then how do we obviously account for it all. So that's a little of the focus of the Gambling Control Board has been doing, working with the industry reps. We're happy with what we've seen thus far. Do I wish we were further down the road? Yeah, obviously, again, a lot of the vendors wish we were as well. But there's still some faith with the charities that they need to understand what's going on. Why do we got to deposit every 2 days when it used to be every 4 days? Well, part of that provision in law simply goes to the focus on minimizing the risk of your assets. We weren't quite sure how much money was going to be coming into these bar locations, and frankly, wanted to keep that threat down, theft or robberies. So like it or not, that's what the provision that was put in that, as far as these games. The deposits got to get to the bank a little more often than what you were used to. At the same time, with these electronic games, there's no longer the requirement to have separate cash banks for every game. It's just one bank. And so at the end of the day, gross sales, prizes paid, net receipts, go to the bank. So we're trying to simplify the accounting and some of the effort in that respect. But I know there's a number of questions. I just wanted to kind of give a quick background. I plan to stick around here and answer any questions. To the extent that they're general in nature, great. If they're specific to your operation, we might want to deal with that on the side. But I do want to again thank reps from Pulltab Plus and the vendors for being here, because we do look at this as an educational opportunity. If you don't understand some of the way the games are played, ask these folks. If you don't understand some of the regulatory requirements in the bill, I'll try to do my best to explain some of those things. But Tom, where'd time you go? I can certainly open up for questions, but some of your questions might be answered after you get a chance to see some of the demos. So, is there a plan of action, or I'll just go back to the back of the room?
Let's do that.
All right.
Sit you.
All right.
Yourself.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. We weren't real sure what we were going to do with Mr. Barrett today. We have him up for questions and answers, but when he said that he's going to stick around and make himself available, probably be a better use of our time. I gave some thought to your question. I can't say for sure what the answer is, but I'm thinking it would be this: anytime. You ask when you can make your deposit. I think the bank will take your money anytime.
No, I didn't want to know when we make our deposit, when we can close the games, if it's only when the distributor or the manufacturer are open. That was the question. So now you can think some more.
Think some more.
That's right.
At least you listen. At
Okay.
least you listen well.
Mr. Barrett's gonna be hanging around. Let's take that up. If we can't, we'll look for the answer. Rob Davis is here with Pulltabs Plus. He's been following this real close. He probably would be able to come up. But yeah, I remember that question did come up as well in one of our meetings, and it was a little bit of a stump. Is it only during regular business hours, or how are we going to make ourselves available at midnight when you want to close the game? Well,
Where's Tom?
Back there.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Is it the distributor that has to close the game out, or can an organization close the game out? That's where I'm kind of like being misled. I don't know who's supposed to close the game out right now.
Yeah.
we might be turning this back into questions and
And that's fine.
answers.
Yeah.
Let's do it questions and
No,
answers.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
If I understand the question, who controls the
The
game?
closing a game out.
Closing the game. It's our position that charities should be in charge. We never really strayed from that. But the vendor that we have, distributor right now, there's the security, the login, who's got what control of the game. That's an issue that it just, can a seller close it out? Gambling manager? So in this particular instance, it's our position that the charity control the games. So if you want to see the level of detail, the game is right to close for whatever reason, you can close that. Now this is again, it's still within the first month of operation. And so we do what's going on. The charity obviously has to handle what's going on. But when the reality came, geez, we want to close the game, well, you got to go through the distributor. That's not going to be the case. It'll be the charity's call. Right now, the answer is, as we told the distributor, the charity wants to close the game, they close the game. You got to help them work through that close of the game. So I don't know if that helps.
It does.
Because it was kind
It
of,
does.
So a distributor is assisting an organization with closing a game.
well, the
Well, it's
distributors, because it's the inventory control, because this thing is set up pretty slick, and I think others are similar. As the game goes down and closes on its own, the automated reorder is what's pretty slick. So gambling managers aren't being called at 10 at night to go load up another paper game or what have you. So to that extent, that's why there's the involvement of the distributor when a game's closing out. It's an automatic reorder. So if there's something any different from this automatic process, that's where there's been some involvement.
There would be an electronic warehouse that you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
That we could draw from.
And again, to the point, because I know a lot of, I couldn't hear the question in the beginning, but there's so many questions, but to the electronic warehouse or the virtual warehouse.
Right.
Our focus is working with manufacturers and distributors. Where does that virtual warehouse sit? And who's got control of that game,
We don't
that
know yet.
asset? No, but that's where,
Right.
as each one's going through the process, the requirement is distributors, manufacturers have to file with the board a plan of distribution.
And everything will be non-posted.
We're switching gears, so let me just finish the
Okay.
virtual warehouse. No, that's fine. He's got another good
Okay.
question. That's why you're up front, and I love that. But what's interesting with this new format is literally the virtual warehouse. We could go to this VFW now, and somewhere in the back room, right, there's shelves of boxes, both games yet to be played, and yeah, I don't know if you're the game, but the virtual warehouse, it's going to simplify that in terms of the storage and the accounting. So we look at that as a good opportunity. But the point I want to make is, as we deal with manufacturers and distributors, we're asking them, where is the virtual warehouse? If it's an instantaneous order, meaning it's sitting presumably with the distributor until such time the charity needs it now, and then automatic order takes place, or is it literally an opportunity where the charity will hold some inventory in their system? And so our focus is on this technology. Who's got access to that box and that virtual and that site? So to answer some of those things, but it is a little bit of put
Agreed.
the hat on, have faith. We're keeping an eye in that respect. Now, you want to talk posting?
Posting, not.
Who else wants to talk about posting? Because that is a hot topic. And for those that might not be familiar with what we're talking about, it says the paper games are played. Many locations, not all, but many locations will post how the winners are doing, how many are left. Now, for everybody's background, in the old days, there was a law requiring charities to post the winners. But that law's been off the books for a number of years. But while it was on the books, everybody had to do it. And when it came off the books, the players are going, well, wait a minute. I want to know how many big winners are left. And so we got some opportunity to kind of lower the odds of the gamble afforded to the player. So I want to stress, there's nobody in this room or anywhere required to post winners. But it's one of those things that have been put in play. If I don't do it, Joe's Bar across the street's going to do it, I'm going to lose a customer, those kinds of things. And we've heard that. We've seen games played. I don't want to paint a bad picture of the industry, but all too familiar with maybe the seller might have information. Hey, the game is good. You know, Joe, come on down to the bar. Those kinds of things, simply because they know the status of the game. So with the advent of the electronics and the way these games play, the ability to commingle games. Nobody commingles paper games because it's an accounting nightmare. But the ability with the electronic games to literally put two games, same phone number, same prize structure, mixed in as the games play down, is going a long way to address, you know, that box buyout and those kinds of things. So there's no requirement to post. To the extent that somebody tries to drill into the game detail literally to see if there's a $5.99 ticket left, the way the standards are set up, the game shut down automatically. Somebody's trying to take a peek at what they shouldn't see.
So nobody will have that access,
Nobody should have that access, not to say they can't.
even gambling managers.
Exactly. Now, the gambling manager should have access to the game summary. What's the gross sales? Prizes paid, net, go to the bank, as I talked about earlier. To the extent the detail, that's our focus. That's the standards that we're putting in place. Now, if for some reason, somebody can convince us why we should require posting other than to satisfy the player. But it's one of those, let's see how it goes. We had some gambling managers up north and a couple other places share their insight. Tom, we do mystery posting, or we do no posting. And tell you the truth, those games play out. Well, you gotta trust who you're selling and who's, at the bar in that respect. But this new electronic format, yes, it's kind of doing away with the posting. The players might not like it, but that's where we come back. You don't have to play electronics. You can continue to play paper. But then as we encourage the charities, it's their call. Look at what the prize payout is in the games. You want to offer electronic games with a higher prize payout for the right reasons, great. If it's capped at 85%. You want a lower prize payout for the paper. You kind of even the playing field is in terms of the gamble. But our focus, the board, is the charity and how the games are played. So hopefully, but I know that's been a sensitive, geez, we can't play and therefore we're not. That's your call. As a player, that's your call. So hopefully that answers.
You don't have to post paper either.
You don't have to post paper either, no. I know when he's, God rest King Wilson, miss him, but he came one day and said, Tom, we need a law passed that says you don't have to post winners. I said, great, done, deal, it's already done. No, I mean really, to educate the industry. A lot of people don't realize that law's been off the books a long time. It's just the remnants of, we've always done it that way, so we continue. All right.
I have concerns about not even the gambling manager being able to go in and see more detail. You know whether you want to close the game down.
Yeah, good question. And what level of detail do you need to see? As I expressed earlier, what you as a gambling manager should be afforded, and any gambling manager, is to look at the totals. What are the gross sales, prizes paid, and what's the net? What percent are we at? Now that could give you an indication, that we're concerned with that, geez, this game is ripe for somebody coming in. But the other key feature with the electronics is you can't buy 50 or 100 tickets or buy out the box. It's limited on the electronics to one play per chance, per time. So we can't deal with some of that. But to the extent that, Lori, you got that information, gross, prizes paid, net, not sure what else you need, because that's going to give you enough information to go keep it in play, close it out. Certainly it's going to tell you what you need to deposit, and that's our focus.
I think all of us realize that people don't carry cash like they used to. And with what bars charge for their ATMs, now is there hopefully in the future where they can swipe a card?
Excellent question. Is there an opportunity to swipe a card? And what we're talking about is doing away with cash. Because I talked to some of the bar owners, and it's amazing. I mean, their deposits these days on a very busy night are a couple, $300. All their transactions are being done debit and credit cards. With that said, the law stipulates the only time a debit card can be used is if you're going to purchase a raffle ticket. Check or debit or cash for a raffle ticket. Otherwise, it's all cash. Now, could we regulate it whether it was debit or credit or? Sure. But it's the legislators mindful of the conduct of the gamble. Sure, you can just go to the ATM, but for right now, the law is limited to cash. And so until that's changed, that's what our focus is.
Is there work on being in charge?
Is there work? I don't know. We could talk to bar members or allied chairs. It's nothing that the board would propose. We're kind of focused on the regulatory. If they want to change, they being the legislators, that's their call.
On the one vendor out there, and they've been in business, what, 2 weeks? How many, 3 weeks? How many games have they closed? They must be keeping track.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, we got one vendor, electronics are out there. The board approved 5 games. Back in that first day when they launched, there was 5 sites. Now, as of today, I think we're at 35. What's the count? 7,500 ticket count, the games. So depending upon what site, I mean, I could if I looked in the system, but as far as how many games, your question is how many games are closed. It depends on what site. I know, is Sean Donahue here? Saw him earlier. Yeah. Sean, and with all due respect, he's got a couple of the bigger sites, and I think you've closed a couple games, 3. So it's a bigger ticket count game. On average, again, for most all you know this, about 3,000 paper tickets. These particular games that were approved are 7,500 count. So.
What happens when the organizations go through their audits? Do they have to close down all the games that are in play on electronic?
What happens when an organization goes through an audit and they have to close down their games? Excellent question, because this is one that we are looking. I'm asking staff, how important is it to know the games in play? And we'll do site visits, and we're going to continue to do site visits, so you can expect to see us out there. But part of the site visit, you got the invoice, for the game that you have in play. There's a number of things on our checklist. To the extent that we shut down, we've heard you pick a bad time to go in there and do site audits, right? We know that. So we really want to minimize any disruption. We think with this new electronic, we can go in that morning and know where the games were from the previous night. So we got that already in our hands. We don't have that with paper now. So that's an example of some efficiencies that, how'd you close out last night? And that's a good thing. But I think in terms of minimizing the disruption, I mean, how many people saw it in the paper in the news last week? Winona? Somebody posing as one of my inspectors, okay? So we're putting out a notice on our what's new, but we don't count the cash. We don't count the cash. We have the valid ID, so hopefully this scam is over and done. The local PD thinks they know who it is, but you hear stuff like that and you go, that's unfortunate, because it's really not what we want to do. But if we're out there doing a site inspection, you're right by our side, especially when it's time to count the cash, if we count the cash. So, hopefully nicely. You want me to ask someone questions? So no.
Some of the guys that got sites, what size start banks are you using? You have to make deposits every
Yeah.
day.
That's a very good question. The question is, for those folks that are already kind of doing it, what is the start bank? Because keep in mind, we're only requiring one bank for those electronic games in play. And it's something we're kind of keeping an eye on. The way we keep an eye on is what cash is going out after the players put the money in, taking some of the credits. And so we have an indication of how these sites are playing. Again, it's only 35. And whether or not you want to share, but there's no limitation that we dictate. It's kind of, let's see how it goes. Get the start bank so it's officially recorded. You need to bump it up, knock it down. There's the opportunity for reserve bank. But I won't speak for, I know a couple MLBA folks are here, Sean, but I think it's less than what we were expecting. It's not simply because you got 5 games, multiply that bank times 5. Not at all. I mean, it's pretty minimal. But I would encourage you to touch base with some of the folks that have, because there's nothing that we dictate regulatory-wise. You got to have this much. You should have enough, but what is that? And that's where I think as we get into some of the educational and really develop a track, we haven't even finished the month yet, per se, a month of activity. But it's not as much as you would think. And again, the focus is on minimizing cash exposure. So whatever you can do, working with the bar owner to get those deposits to the bank securely, that's great. I mean, some of the other hot button issues, and we didn't talk link bingo. That's a hot question. How soon are we going to see link bingo? We don't know yet. We're working with these vendors in terms of the standards by which these games will play. There's some issues of reporting, but we're trying to work as fast as we can in light of what we anticipate happening. But you talk to some of the industry reps and they get a flavor that this link bingo could be the sleeper. We didn't estimate as many sites jumping onto it, but there certainly seems to be enough interest. So it remains to be seen in that respect.
You have to keep your paper bank and your electronic bank separate.
You have to keep your paper and your electronic bank separate, yes. Yep.
On your reserve bank, can you have a reserve bank that includes paper and electronic? Is that
Can you have a
okay?
reserve bank that includes paper and electronic? And I might be stumping the director here, but I think the purpose of the reserve bank is in case you need to dip in
Right.
to cover one of those paper games. So I would say there's a reserve allowance that you could use. You just got to tell where it
Make
went
sure
to.
where it went.
Yeah.
Of course.
But I'm sure my specialist will tell me if I'm wrong in that respect.
When you buy one of them email or e-ticket games, e-Pulltab games, and you got your 6 machines, does that go to all 6 machines? or you gotta buy a different game for each machine?
Yep, no, very good question. To that one, I don't know if you heard them, but you got a machine, can I buy all games in that one device? If we're talking pull tabs, the answer should be yes. There might be a rare instance we get 2 electronic vendors at the same site. But in that case, you would depend upon which vendor you were choosing to play the games. But that prompted me to hopefully answer another question that's out there in terms of the number of devices that are in play. Because the law dictates you can, a small operation, you could have up to 6 of each. 6 for pull tab, 6 devices that'll play Link Bingo. If you're more than 200 seats, you can have up to 12. And if you're bingo hall, you can have up to 50. But the law stipulates it's number of devices in play. And so how do we interpret what does in play mean? And what we've done, and this is where we work with the vendors, if they got one of these devices, and I already got the credits, I'm playing pull tabs. If I'm in that pull tab mode, that means I got one of those 6 devices in play playing pull tabs. Now when the electronic Link Bingo comes on board, and it's maybe on the same device, you're going to stop playing pull tabs and you're going to switch and want to start playing Link Bingo, then you've given up that right, that in-play status with the pull tabs. Just so I understand. But this is where we work with the vendors. How does the system account for these devices in play when it hits that law and hits that limit in law? And so far so good. That the ones we've been talking to think it's easily manageable. But if you're playing pull tabs to the extent that you, the distributor that provided the devices, has however many games in play, right now there's, what is it, 5 games. You get your choice of those 5 just with the device you get. You don't have to get another one.
But you could take those credits and apply them to bingo
You took,
on the same screen.
now the question is, can I take those credits that I loaded up in the device and play them to bingo? And this is one where I'm going to be talking with these vendors, because depending upon who they line up with or who the charity lines up with, you could get one vendor that offers both electronic pull tabs and Link Bingo. So, and they literally, I don't know, is it technical, guys, the wallet? But let's, for example, and this is a good question because it's some of the education. Let's say, for example, these guys do pull tabs and these guys do the bingo. Stop me, right? So now we're trying to figure out efficiencies because we got one device at the charitable location, but it's being fed by 2 different manufacturers working through your distributors, right? So I get the device and I got my $20 worth of credits. I'm playing pull tabs. You were pull tabs, right? All right, so I'm playing pull tabs, and the play is being credited. Eventually, he gets a piece of the action of the charity. If I want to switch and go to the bingo side, this is where we're working. This is some of the things working through is how does that money get controlled if they simply go to the point of sale? How do we get assured that they get their bingo receipts and you get your pull tab? And so to the extent, I know there's some reps in the room, we met last week via phone conference and in office to deal with that very issue is how do we account for the money, because it is about the money. But it's one of the issues, don't have an exact answer yet other than they're working on that, because it's how they split the money. They could certainly come in and I want credits, $20 for bingo and I want 20 for pull tabs, and they stay somewhat separated.
So would it be fair if all of these guys doing bingo, all these different manufacturers, were linked together so we're all playing the same bingo game?
That's why I'm glad you're up front. I don't know if y'all heard that, but the concern is if we got all these vendors and they're doing Link Bingo, can the Link Bingo vendors link up? Because the more Link Bingo vendors you have,
The bigger pot.
the bigger the pot, but if you don't, it gets watered down. We understand that. But the law currently doesn't allow for who would be in charge. So that's one of those things we've got to work through. But right now, there's no provision that this Link Bingo vendor works with this one.
When will these guys, do you think, these new vendors be approved? How soon?
Good question. How soon will they be approved? They're all, so, see,
That's your
officially, no,
department.
the reason I hesitate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I started this one.
Thanks for.
They put me up to it.
Good thing they put you up to our, well, that's the burning question. I will officially say that until they're approved by the board, officially, it's all confidential.
But we don't know when that's going to be.
Yes, it's
We really don't, because they're different stages, you know, who applied when and how complicated their corporate structure is. I don't want to look at anybody in particular, but they're going through the process, but I couldn't give back. I would love to see everybody in line tomorrow, and I say that officially, but it's not going to happen. And why tomorrow? Because tomorrow's our board meeting day.
Anybody
So,
on table?
Anybody
now?
slated? No.
I know this is a dumb question, but with the 7,500 ticket count, how much would the net be that you're looking for profit at the bottom line?
Yep. And who's good at math? But on a 7,500 ticket count, what's the bottom line? Well, if it's 7,500 ticket, and we're talking $1 game, 7,500 bucks, and then there's 85% right now. It could be less depending on the game, but so whatever the 15% of the 75. Anybody get that? Whatever that is, that's the net. 1125. 1125. Thank you.
How much of 11?
We're playing linked bingo and we're only allowed 6 devices. Only 6 people on my site can be playing bingo concurrently.
Yeah, the limitation is if you're a small site, 6 at one time. Or 12, yeah, 6 or 12. Yeah, if that's the limitation. Now somebody said, well, geez, that's not enough. And as I've talked to others, let's first worry about all those 12 or 6 in use to be able to give some information back to the legislators to go, it's working or it's not working. So, somebody else said.
I'm looking at the data that's been in the press, and it's also in the handout here, the breakdown of the devices, what money goes with it. As I look at this, they're all bar ops. Is there, I mean, I don't see how you can support a booth operation with this kind of breakdown. Is anybody doing a booth op, and how do they work? How do they get their money out?
I think the question, again, to help paraphrase, there's a difference between bar op, booth op, and different expenses as it relates to rent. Okay, and I know that's a concern. Has anybody done the math to see, you know, what's more cost effective? And it depends. Yeah, Bob Manson over there, one of the accountants. You can certainly touch base with him, but there is some efficiencies. I'll be the first to say, right, Robert, that every charity is a little different in terms of compensation, what they're paying rent, or the activity at the site. So there's a number of factors that go in. You know, one doesn't necessarily fit all cases, but to the extent that what's in law as it relates to the bar rent, what the bar owner gets in terms of rent, certainly benefits the charity in a high sales location with the booth because they're capped. They're capped at $1,750, anything beyond that.
I guess what I'm looking at is the percent that goes to the rental of the device and the taxes. By the time you're all done, there's money left to support the training. But
yeah, and again, if you don't think, because there's how big of the pie gets split is what we're talking about. So if there's still a split that's due to the charity, if that's not enough by your choice, that's fine. Again, you don't have to get into that if that's not enough opportunity.
But, okay, but I've got let's say I have a bar I've got a couple machines in, okay, right now. And the owner says, I want Pulltabs, I want electronic Pulltabs. And you know that it's not going to really be worth it, but he's, well, okay, then I'll get another charity in. What's your answer to that?
What? As a regulator, or no? I mean, because I know that's some of the problem. I don't mean to make light of it,
Right.
but that is an issue. Again, the biggest thing we've told the bar owners, and again, I look to our Minnesota Licensed Beverage we were close with. I mean, the day after it was launched, a lot of bars were calling us, and as I said earlier, if you have turtle gaming, talk to your charity. They might not be comfortable. This is new. This is new. They need to. We don't even have our first month under the belt, so this is part of the cause. And I think a lot of the charities are taking. Let's see what happens. Obviously, they want to see more competition out there, more product available to choose from. Again, that's why today I think it's important you're here to see what they got. But it is ultimately your call. If for whatever reason you don't want to get into it, you don't have to. Now, could the charity say, well, then you're out and the next one's in? They could, sure. But it depends on how local your charity is. You know, would it look well for, you know, Joe's Bar to kick out the youth hockey? I mean, there's some balancing. I think the point right now is if you're getting pressure, just why are they so energized to go? We get that. You know, if there's somebody right across the street that they're losing business to the extent that the numbers justify going in operation, that's totally your call. So, I know I didn't give an answer, but I can't, I mean, work with the bar owner and hopefully they understand. I don't know what else.
I had a question about, is there a requirement from your office on house rules for electronics? And regardless, can you have like a minimum purchase? You don't have somebody coming up for $1 for the machine.
Well, first of all, is there requirements for house rules? And hopefully everybody knows you are required to have house rules that stipulate how the conduct's gonna be played. Pretty much standard. To the extent that you can say you're required minimum purchase, I mean, you require minimum purchase for pull tabs? Paper pull tabs? No. And yet and everybody understands this, I hope. There's more transactions involving the seller with the paper than there is electronic. Not good or bad, but you're not having to go back every $1 winner or $2 winner or $5 winner. You know, the player is given those credits, so there's some savings in that respect for time. But to the extent that you dictate, it depends on what you're talking about. I hate to say today that you can do this and you can't do that. That's one of those things as we work with the industry. What are the limitations? Or how are you going to conduct the game? A good example is the end of the night. I'm playing this thing, and the official time is from 8 in the morning till 2 in the morning. And this particular bar is officially open till 2, but I'm playing. What's supposed to be in line is, fair warning, we're approaching the shutdown time. But at 2 o'clock, it gives fair warning. There's no more purchases. You're allowed some time to go cash in if you got credits left. But it's those kinds of things that the play of the game will be monitored almost by itself. If we use the example, we go to some site inspections, we got an allegation, what have you, and here's that prize receipt, and we ask the bar owner, are you open at 3 in the morning? Well, of course not. Well, why is this prize receipt time stamped at 2:50 in the morning?
Oops.
Oops. But there's an example after hours play.
So is the answer no, you can't require
I would say it'd be the
minimum
same.
purchase?
Yeah, I mean, again, you can't dictate I mean,
If somebody wants to buy it, they want to try out, they gotta log their name in and
He's saying spend $1.
log their name on $1.
Seems like a lot of work for $1.
seems like a lot of work for
3 cents.
Yeah, but I would really, if that's what it is, but I don't think we could dictate minimum purchase. That's a good one for, first time I've ever heard that question, so to the extent that you require it.
So we will see a new rules board.
Well, there could be, yeah, I mean, there's some things pertaining to electronic games that should fit in the house rule. A good point, and this is a good opportunity, but I don't mean to be taking too much time here, Tom, but this prompted another thing, because these devices should be designed to go into sleep mode like regular computers do. So if I'm playing one, and my meal comes, I'm going to set it aside. Now this has to deal with, we didn't want the bartenders or sellers to monitor play that close. But I made the decision to kind of set that aside and enjoy my meal. Well, that's taking up one of those devices that could be in demand somewhere else. But once it's, presumably listed in the house rules that you have umpteen minutes to either continue play or if you've chosen to set it aside, you don't lose the credits, you just lose that opportunity to continue play, but then it affords somebody else to use the device. So those are some of the things that...
So if it does take off and it goes hog wild, those numbers could change. Instead of 6 devices for 200 and under, could go to 24 devices.
If it goes hog wild, those are your words. That to the extent that that's causes action legislatively, again, not the board.
Right.
Right. That could change.
Yeah.
I'm not saying if.
Yeah.
On your question answer sheet here, it says private seats not required for electronic Pulltabs. This is the player will be able to see the game summary for each game and play. What does that mean? Game summary?
Does that say player?
Yes, it's player.
Who put that? Is that
We put it out.
you put it out? Thank you.
But we took the questions off your website.
Okay. Well, there might be a mixture. Can the player see the game summary? The player can see like they do now with a flare. How many total prizes and the tickets? That's afforded on, that's some of the things we look for. But that information is available to the player anytime. But I was interpreting, could a player see the game detail, and that's a no. Yeah, they see the flare. All right, again, I'll stick around, any questions, I know we got some media folks here and reporters, so Gene, hopefully you got my spelling right, and got all those quotes right. I didn't say hog wild, that was somebody else. All right, but I'll stick around, thank you.
Hey, Tom, of that 5.4%,
That's not our number.
is 100% of that money gonna go to the Vikings?
The question is of that 5.4, but that's not, I think that was the number MLBA put out, or somebody put out, but this is a good opportunity so everybody understands. Charitable gaming has always paid taxes to the state. And again, we're the regulators, we're neutral on the tax policy and everything else, but they've always paid taxes to the state, whether it's too much, I get all that. Never before has the tax receipts paid to the state been designated to a bricks and mortar. It's always been into the general fund, legislators spend it wisely, until this session where it's now portion of the tax collection goes towards the bonding. And so everybody understands, it's not just the activity from these electronic devices. What the revenue folks are and the finance folks are looking at is they've set a base level, I believe it's 38 million based on the previous year's total. What was going into the general fund already, and so they put it at that rate, so anything beyond that, from electronics, from paper sales increase, from increased bingo play, it's the additional revenue that's collected from the taxes that will be dedicated to the bonding expense. Okay?
Okay. Thank you once again, Tom. And as Tom said, he's gonna be around today. I suspect he'll be